My name is Berkeley Baum, and I will be teaching on the reactionary 20s. I will start about 10 minutes into class period, where we have just reviewed the roaring 20s, which we learned about last time. Alright class, thank you for reviewing the roaring 20s today. And just as a review, the 4 keywords that we used for the roaring 20s were the flapper, the Model T, the gangster, and the radio. Now for any of you who have taken physics, you know that for every action there's an opposite reaction, and it's the same in history. So there's a reaction to all the things that are going on in the roaring 20s, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So there are 3 main keywords I want you to remember today that we're going to go over, and that is the Red Scare, the KKK, and an isolationist foreign policy. And you'll see all of those on your vocab sheets, and we'll fill them out as we go. So let's start with the Red Scare. By raise of hands, how many of you guys have heard of the Red Scare? Awesome, about 75% of you, so that's good. I want to point out that there's 2 Red Scares in the United States history. This is the first Red Scare, and this happens in the 20s. There's another one that will come later after World War II that we'll learn about later in this class. Let's talk about the first one right now. So, first we're going to review a little bit. Right now I want to look at this third point. The Sedition Act. So we talked about the Sedition Act in our last unit. How many of you guys remember that? Perfect. So we're going to talk about it more in depth today because it really fits in with the Red Scare. So you'll see this on your vocab sheets. I want you to write it down. So the Sedition Act. Can I have someone read that for me? All right, go ahead.
An act that restricts citizen rights to criticize the Constitution.
Yes, and the reason why we have this act is that it made sure that the U.S. stayed on board with war efforts. So the United States government was worried that if popular opinion started going against the war, that our efforts would be wasted and that we wouldn't be as effective as we need to be. So they instituted the Sedition Act. Right now I want you to pull out those graphic organizers that I handed out earlier, and we are going to do a little activity where we compare the Sedition Act to the First Amendment. Alright, so let's first look at the Sedition Act and the First Amendment. Can I get a reader to read the Sedition Act? It's the one on the left side. Awesome. Go ahead and read.
Whoever, when the United States is at war, shall willfully make or convey false reports or false statements with intent to interfere with the operation of the military or incite insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, or refusal of duty, or shall willfully write, print, or publish any disloyal, profane, or abusive language about the form of government of the United States or the Constitution or the military shall be punished by a fine or imprisonment or both.
Thank you. So I know that's an earful, and we're going to give you more time to study it later, but I just want you to be able to see these as well as hear them so you can understand them better. Could I get a reader for the First Amendment that's on the right side of the board? Yes.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Thank you.
Redress of grievances.
Thank you. So now we are going to compare these two. So on your graphic organizers, there's a compare and contrast chart. So I want you to take a minute individually and write down the main points for both the Sedition Act on the left side and the First Amendment on the right side, and focus on the parts of both of these that contradict. So at this point, the students will be looking at a graphic organizer that looks like this, the bottom part, and they will be writing individually these points. They'll get about 2 minutes to do this, so we're going to fast forward through that part. Alright class, now that you have had time to look at these acts and write down the main points, I want you to get together in your teams of 4 that are already pre-assigned, and I want you to write one sentence on why these two are in conflict. So I'll give you 1 minute to do so. And I will be calling on a random team, so make sure that your sentence is well put together because you could get called on. Alright, we'll fast forward to that time. Alright, team number 4, share your sentence.
So our sentence was, the Sedition Act contradicts the First Amendment because it limits citizens' freedom of speech as well as petition.
Good job. That was very well put together, Team 4. So the main point that I want all of you to get out of this is that the Sedition Act clearly contradicted the First Amendment. And the reason why the Sedition Act was passed was because of fears that the United States government had. That's a really important point. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, this fear, as we move on to our next point. So let's go back to the slide. Who knows who this man is? Alright, so we talked about him before, but you might not recognize him. This is Lenin. So Lenin leads the Bolshevik Revolution that leads to communist government in Russia. And right here you can see that is the same year that the United States entered World War I. And who knows what communism is? By raise of hands. Yes?
It's when there's a dictator and no, that's not right. It's when all the people have the same stuff and that kind of thing.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, that's spot on. So the definition that I want all of you guys to write down is right here, communism. Will you read that out loud for us?
Government has power of property, work, and pay. The goal is to have a classless society.
Perfect. And another form of government that is in contradiction to communism is democracy. Will you read that out loud for us?
A system of government in which power is vested in the people who rule either directly or through freely elected representatives. The people themselves have power over property, work, and pay.
Perfect. Okay, who in their own words can describe to me the difference between these two? Yes.
So communism, the people don't have a say. Democracy, the people do.
Yeah, exactly. So in communism, the government is kind of in charge, and in a democracy, the people are in charge, either directly or indirectly. So we talked about how Russia has communism. What is a country that has a democracy? You guys should all know this. Yes?
The United States.
The United States, perfect. Now, the problem with communism and democracy is that because they're different, they can't exist in the same place. And so it causes kind of scare for both of them. So communist countries are scared of democracy because if democracy spreads, communism is going to get smaller. And democratic countries are scared of communism because if communism spreads in democratic countries, or democratic governments are going to get smaller. So it's important to understand that these two are opposite and they cannot coexist. So we're going to do a little activity. I want all of you guys to close your eyes. And I want you to think of a time that you've been scared in your life. So examples of this could be if you were walking with your friends late at night and it was dark and you couldn't see anything, or maybe you were in a haunted house or you watched a scary movie, or maybe you were alone with your siblings and you could hear different noises in your house. So think of this time that you're scared. Now I want to ask you an important question. How does the fear of those around you influence your own fear? So, if you're really scared and the people around you are calm, how does that affect you? It usually makes you more calm because you're not scared if they're not scared. But if the people around you are getting really scared, you are going to feel even more and more scared. You guys can open your eyes now. So this is what's happening in the United States at this time. We're going to talk about different reasons why people are scared, but as the people around them get scared, you get more scared, and then they get more scared, and then you get more scared, and this mass panic reaches across the United States. So now we're going to talk about some of the things that led up to that fear. So agitations and reactions, these are some of the things that led up. So in the summer of 1919, bombs are mailed to important Americans. So this would be like bombs being sent to Bill Gates or to Beyonce or to other famous people in the United States. And so this makes people scared about why this is happening. And an obvious person for them to point their fingers at is the communists. And so they're blaming the communists for this. Also, another thing that's making people in the United States scared are labor strikes. After World War I ended, a lot of soldiers were coming home, and they didn't have jobs. And so they start doing labor strikes, and it's harder to get jobs, and no one's getting paid. And this scares the United States as well, and they blame communists for this as well. So these and other events lead to what's called the Palmer Raids. This is on your vocab sheet, so be sure to write it down. Will someone read this for me? Yes.
Attorney General Palmer's use of the Sedition Act to arrest suspected communists.
So we talked about the Sedition Act before and how it doesn't really fall in the First Amendment, and how it's not really constitutional. So this leads to the largest mass arrest in U.S. history, and an important point here is that it is based on suspicions and not hard evidence. So a ton of people start getting arrested in the United States because this fear, the Red Scare, is spreading through the United States. Alright, now we're going to do what we've done before. I know that we go through a lot of these political cartoons, but I think they're important because they're primary source documents and they can help us understand the feeling at the time. So, like before, whenever we have a cartoon or a propaganda poster that we're analyzing, we ask three main questions. The first one is, what do you see physically? The second one is, what is it representing? And the third is, what is the audience supposed to feel? So these three questions are written on the board right here in case you forget. So I will do this first one so that you guys can kind of remember how we do this. So first question, what do I see physically? Well, I see a man getting pulled down by another man into the sea that's labeled chaos, and the man on top of the water is trying to reach for something called solid ground. So now let's move on to what is it representing. So this man right here, civilization, I'm thinking this represents the United States. And there's this war in the background that they're trying to move on from, and he's trying to grasp onto solid ground. But this man labeled Bolshevism, which is communism, is pulling him down into a sea of chaos. So this is representing the United States being pulled down by communism. And finally, what is the audience supposed to feel? Well, I feel scared because I just got out of this war and I want to be stable. I want my country to be stable. And this cartoon is telling me that communism is going to pull me down. All right, now it's your guys' turn. But before we look at this next cartoon, I want to define a word for you. And this is on your vocab sheets. So this is xenophobia. Who knows what xenophobia means? Alright, so let's break it down. So what's a phobia? Yes.
It's when you're afraid of something.
Perfect. So xenophobia is a fear of foreigners. And this is a huge part of the Red Scare, is this fear of foreigners. So I'm going to put up another cartoon, and I'm going to give you guys a second to look at it, and then I'm going to ask you to answer these questions. And I'll be cold calling you, so I can call any one of you, so be sure that you have an answer in your mind. Alright, John, what do you see physically?
Well, it looks like there's a person walking past this big wall that's kind of has spikes on the wall, and it's labeled the United States. And on the door it says immigration restrictions, and it looks like the person is undesirable.
Perfect. Tanner, what is this representing?
Well, I think maybe it's talking about how the U.S. didn't want foreigners in the country.
Mm-hmm. Good job. And how is it supposed to make you feel?
Well, I think the person's head is kind of like a bomb, so we don't want the person to be in there.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of making people feel this xenophobia, right? It's making everyone feel this fear of foreigners. Perfect. Thank you so much.